Lorena, do you mind sort of sharing how you had that moment of realization, or what were the triggers for yours?
Absolutely. So a very different field, but I also traveled 52 weeks out of the year for 8 years. So I get the travel element of where you were coming from. So I spent my earlier part of my adult life planning for and working towards a career in entertainment, which has been my dream since as long as I can remember. And I achieved that and I attained it and I did it and I loved it. And I was actually, so I was living abroad in Japan, working on a circus there, and went through some major health issues, specifically that I got diagnosed with cancer while living in a foreign country. And while the medical care system there is amazing and wonderful, and in a lot of ways I was thankful to be there and go through that, it was really eye-opening for me to be so far from friends and family and really have no home base while going through something like that. And so that was really sort of my great realization, if you will, that like the career I was in was not like a sustainable path for me, and that I needed to find somewhere where I could be in one place, where I could be close to my friends and family, where I could like establish some roots. So when my contract was up in Japan, I did not renew. And when I came back to the US, I decided that I did not want to be in a career where I would be touring anymore. So I landed in New York City, which is a city that I love, and I got a job to pay the bills, which was something that, everybody has to do, but I was working as an office manager. So yes, I had a paycheck, and yes, I had medical insurance and all those good things, but going from such a creative career to a career where I was experiencing no creativity in my day-to-day life was really hard for me. And so I'd already been kind of figuring out what it was I wanted to do and where I wanted to see and how I might get there when the pandemic happened. But I'm sure many other people have experienced the difficulty of going back to school when you work full time. And that was like a really overwhelming idea for me, to try and go back to school and to pivot careers while having to work full time to pay my bills. And so the pandemic happened, and that really fast forwarded things for me, because I got laid off from the job that I didn't like. And I suddenly had all the time in the world to figure out what I did want to be doing. And I pretty quickly started looking into software engineering, honestly, starting out as a way of, okay, what is something that is going to be sustainable? What's an industry that is not going anywhere, that's going to pay well, that's going to, give me the things that I need in life. But really quickly discovered how much creativity there is in coding, and found something that I loved in a really unexpected place, and just dove headfirst into the world of programming and coding, and spent most of the pandemic starting out self-learning, and then going to a boot camp to set myself up to make a career pivot, which I have now been able to do. So
no, amazing. And thank you for sharing. I mean, there's a lot that happened in what is obviously a relatively short space of time, both in terms of international relocation and facing terrifying health challenges. So we're grateful that you shared, and just appreciate the fact that you were able to kind of take those things and turn them into something which is sort of directionally where you are now. I'd love to come back to you, Lorena, just to sort of follow on that a little bit. So obviously you made the decision to study so that you could get into this industry. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what it took to be that brave, to take that deep breath and pursue that, not really knowing what the outcome might be, and whether there were any individuals or influences or resources that you leaned on to really enable you and help you take that step forward?
Yeah, so I started out talking to friends who had pivoted into a similar career. I have a a few friends over the years who come from a theater and artistic background and had found themselves in the tech industry. And so that was kind of my first step, was like reaching out to some people I hadn't spoken to in years, but was still Facebook friends with, and just being like, hey, I know you did this thing. Like, can you talk to me about it? Like, why did you do it? How did you do it? How did you learn? So that was really my starting off point, and came out of that with a lot of like free resources that I could try out online. Like there's programs like Pluralsight and freecodingbootcamp.com, and like all these resources online where you can really learn a lot on your own. But from that, I also quickly figured out for myself that like there's so much to learn. Where do you start? So I started looking at a boot camp structure. Sorry if you hear my dog in the background, she's right here next to me. But yeah, so I started looking into like a boot camp structure, because even if I was no longer working, still like going back to school for a whole degree is like, that's a long span of time, and that's a lot of money. And that's a hard decision to make, to take out loans and all that. So I started first looking at a boot camp structure, because it's typically like 12 to 24 weeks of really intensive study to learn a new skill. And being in a pandemic, there's plenty of time for really intensive study. So I looked into a lot of programs, but also quickly honed in on wanting to do a specifically like female and queer representative program. So I ended up at a school called Hackbright, which is for all women and non-binary people, to really like have a culture of support of people around me while I learned. And I think that was like the best decision I could have made, was like being in like a really like accepting and positive environment while I learned, and with people who were coming to it from a really similar career pivot situation. So talking to friends, finding mentors, free resources, boot camp was kind of my flow.
Thank you. That's incredible, and amazing that you kind of found the right home sort of to do the study and to spend the time. And I do think it's commendable. You say there's plenty of time to study during the pandemic. I think there are a lot of people that had plenty of time to study and probably did not. So I think that's very commendable to be able to actually stay focused on that. So thank you for sharing.